Here we are. We are live with another episode of Lunch with Lunsford. Happy Tuesday,
Hey.
everyone.
Happy Tuesday.
How you doing?
Good.
All right.
It's beautiful outside today. There are no major windstorms or sudden thunderstorms that are approaching.
Yeah,
great.
It has not been the springiest spring to this point, so I'm eager for that to turn a corner myself.
Yeah, that snow this weekend was not a great moment.
Not a winner. All right, so we've got some attendees trickling in. Thank you all for joining us for another week of Lunch with Lunsford. It's my favorite hour of the week, and I hope that you all enjoy as well. We're really happy today to be joined by Summer L. Williams and Shawn LaCount from Company One Theater, and I'm so excited to listen to your conversation. At this point, I'm going to disappear and turn the reins over to Mark. So thank you both for joining us, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll see you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
So good to meet you. It's been, 2 months in this virtual world?
Oh my gosh.
Which is just kind of mind-blowing. But it's been fun to spend this hour each week sort of just diving into, work that folks have done and sort of remembering incredible pieces that have been made and getting sort of the inside scoop on what's been going on. But in particular, I'm excited this week because it's also been really interesting, and I think a lot of folks who watch have enjoyed hearing about not only artists talking about their process and some of the sort of history behind their favorite moments from shows, but also to get to talk to artistic leaders sort of about how we are approaching this moment and how we are sort of considering our role and responsibility as theater makers in this time. And I think the two of you were so important to that conversation, in particular how it applies to Boston and the industry at large. And so I'm so grateful to both of you for being here today. So for those folks who may be meeting Summer and Shawn for the first time, Shawn is the artistic director and Summer is the associate artistic director and both founding members of Company One Theater. That is in its 21st season.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very exciting. But also both incredible stage directors, Elliot Norton Award winners, and have been a staple of the Boston theater scene for over 20 years. So it's very exciting for me to get to speak to you both. And Shawn, I don't know if you remember, but you're one of the first people I met when I moved here.
Really?
I've been here almost 9 years in June. Mm-hmm. But I moved here and the TCG conference was in Boston that year. And so Ari Barbanel had introduced us.
That's right.
and Shawn was the first to give me the inside track on theater.
And you still came, which is really beautiful.
I came and I stayed nearly a decade now.
No, we are grateful for you, Mark. I'm glad you're here.
It's true.
There's a lot to talk about today. In particular, the sort of incredible collaboration that has emerged between A.R.T, Oberon, and Company One over the last 5 years. But I want to just start because I think, so many people who tune in each week are students and are really interested to know, I don't know if this was your experience, but certainly mine starting in the theater, the sort of mystery behind how one becomes a theater professional or how one becomes a theater artist, which everyone has their own story and everyone has their own journey. So I'd love to start just sort of right into the sort of artist genesis story. And Summer, maybe you can kick us off and just talk to us about sort of like how you caught the theater bug. What about directing was appealing and exciting to you, and how that kind of manifested for you.
So there are many different versions of this story. My father's mother would have said it was because she took me to this little place in South Jersey called Apple Farms when I was like 3 or 4. They did little plays, and she would say that's where it all came from. When I was 15, I went to Freedom Theater in Philadelphia, and if folks know, Walter Dallas, who just passed away, was the artistic director of Freedom Theater at that time. And a teenager in like one of the oldest Black theaters in the country. It was like an eye-opening experience, and I had a tremendous mentor named Wesley Montgomery, who encouraged me to read my first Intozaki Shange play ever. Had never even heard of her, and everyone thinks it's for colored girls, but it wasn't. It was Spell Number 7, and I read it and like just I fell in love in ways that I didn't know were possible. And that sort of like made me really hungry to figure out like this thing, this place has room for me, and room for stories that I'm really interested in telling, and how can I find my way um, to deeper involvement. So fast forward to college, and I'm a freshman, and there's this guy on campus named Shawn LaCount, who's like super duper popular, and super duper cool guy, especially in the theater department. Um, and was also running the student theater org at the time, and got connected. And we were not friends at all. He was too cool for me. But we totally, and us and a bunch of other folks, who we'll talk about later, sort of set off on this trajectory. And directing came slowly. I thought for a while I was going to be an actor. Then I realized, my gosh, that is tough work. I have to like listen to someone and internalize what they are saying, and I have to also like bring this text to life. And I have to be a really great listener to the environment and the audience and everyone around me. That's a lot. That's a big ask. And I found that my passion was really behind figuring out how to construct the world in which those folks could thrive.
When I was thinking about being an actor in college, I used to think like it's a great gig. Like what you do eight things a week that are 2 hours long, like. Yeah. Right? And then I actually got to making theater, and I was like, oh
no. Seriously, I think actors are like, they do amazing things all the time.
Yeah. Shawn, what about you?
So my story, I find when I tell theater folk and classes of students my story, it doesn't always go well, but I will tell you the truth, because it's a little, the thing that drew me to theater was a little bit anti-theater. So my mother was a theater educator. I think she had wanted to be an actor when she was younger. So we had it in the blood a little bit. She taught middle school theater for a while, directed kids. And so that was my upbringing. She came from a theatrical family for sure. And she would do a one-woman retelling of Peter Pan, the whole thing at bedtime, without text for me. Of course, Mary Martin, etc. And that was instead of reading me books. So that's kind of my kind of lovely, heartwarming connect. But the truth is, I tried very hard not to go into the theater. Through my academic, when I was young, school was not easy for me. I was lucky to get through it as I did, and I actually broke an ankle going out for the freshman year basketball team, and during the tryouts. And so I had my folks and my guidance counselor saying, "You got to do something, man. We don't trust you to hang out." And so I was like, "All right, I know about this theater thing. My mother is in it." So I ended up acting in high school, and that was something I enjoyed doing for the most part. But I also remember I grew up in Boston and in Brookline, and I remember going to kind of the big theaters and being shipped in on the yellow school buses. And I remember actively feeling like this isn't for me. This is not for my people. Like I don't know. This doesn't feel like the stories being told. I kind of love Summer's story because I didn't have that opportunity to see any version of like cultural authenticity or specificity or diversity on stage. And it was a lot of like, kind of older, white, wealthy New Yorkers being mean to each other, sitting on couches plays. And I just didn't understand. I would look around and I kind of had this sense that it cost a lot of money and that there were a lot of resources and the potential was enormous. But I wasn't sure why they were selecting those stories or those people to put on the stage or to put in that audience. And so I really kind of struggled with that. And then, as Summer mentioned, we went to college together, and I found out that this student group at a small school in Worcester, Clark University, shout out. That student group, they were like, you have a $10,000 budget. I was like, you're gonna trust us with 10 grand? And I thought that was like amazing. And I was like, we can do whatever we want. And they're like, yeah, really, pretty much. So we did all kinds of things. And that was like my first kind of taste of producing, and like we would supplement the theater department when we had to bring in classes and teachers and things that they weren't doing. So that was an exciting time to learn. And then I think as I was getting ready to graduate, started kind of talking to folks who I thought were exceptional in different ways that I wasn't. Summer being one of those people, and talking about what would it mean to go back to Boston or to start a theater company in a place where I thought we had something to offer, change the landscape, change kind of the look of what was happening on stages. And so there were 6 of us who came out of that program and started the company. And I was hoping they'd fall in love with Boston, and they've hung out.
So let's like pull into that further, because what were those first few years like in Boston? I mean, for your company in particular, like how were you thinking about show selection? How were you thinking about spaces? Sort of using resources in Boston. What was that like in the first few seasons?
So we didn't know what we were doing. The first thing we did is we remounted this show that really had very little to do with any sort of mission. But we remounted a show we had done at school, and we used just about all the resources we had at school to do it. We did it at the Boston Center for the Arts because nobody was renting their black box in the summertime, and we got a meal deal on it. And we had this really weird experience where we sold out 5 weeks. And it was like this incredible success. And we were, everybody was acting and building the set and doing everything. We were like,
we got this.
It's like, what's the problem here? What's the problem?
This is hard.
We were cocky, or I'll speak for myself. I was cocky, but we did that, and then we're like, all right, next thing the second show we did was this super dark, obscure 2-person Tennessee Williams play that may or may not be about incest, and the only time we could get space was during the holidays. So it was a 2-person show, and I think we would be lucky to have more people in the house than in the cast. But that was the second show we did. So everything we made on the first show, we lost on the second. And then we had the decision to make to rebuild and decide if we wanted to keep going. And that's kind of how we played it, show to show. And then eventually the investment and the passion was there. And then season to season, and over 20 years, we've figured out a way to feel slightly more secure.
Yeah. I'll also add that there was something about the puzzle of it all that I think was really essential in terms of driving us. Like how do we figure out how to like do the thing that we want to be doing with the people that we want to be doing the thing with, for the people we want to be doing the thing for. And like that sort of like figuring out that formula has been the thing I think that has really pushed us.
Yeah. I mean, I when I think about Company One, the first thing I almost always think about is the mission, because I think it's such a strong, building community at the intersection of art and social change. It's such a like great, specific, deep mission for an organization. And Summer, maybe you can take us into that a little bit more, kind of how, as a company, you arrived at that as a mission statement, and how that continues to guide the work that you do in the season selection and so on and so forth.
Sure. I think it started as a little bit of like maybe even like a punk aesthetic, sort of like we're out here, we're young, we're scrappy, we're eager, and we're gonna figure out how to create the content that we want to see. And through the process of creating the content that we want to see, we wanted to be able to lean into, well, who's the we? Like we know who we are, but like outside of us, there's this greater we that isn't being reached or served, and we have a responsibility there. And how can we walk towards that responsibility? So like the very clear naming of it in the mission took its time as we had to grow up, as we had to mature, as we had to like really listen, as we had to watch how the city was evolving and be really thoughtful about representation and who was not being represented and who was being left behind. And so it took some time to really build and cultivate it, but it's the thing that was sort of embedded in us all along, which was this desire to make something that would stir and fuel and move people with the people we want to be making with and for other people. Like that, for me, is the very simplified version of how we got there. And it's important that it took that time, I think, because it's organic and strong and really woven into the fabric of who we are.
Yeah, I feel like it sits so deeply also with both of you as artists, both in how your work is manifest at Company One, but also in the work that you do outside of Company One, I think. And, you meet artistic staffs who like work at a Shakespeare company, and when they work at the Shakespeare company, they direct Shakespeare, and then maybe they're going out and, pursuing other artistic endeavors or diving out of the work. But it feels like you guys hold that so central, not bound by genre, but holding that principle very central in your art that allows you to sort of tackle a multitude of voices and plays and whatnot.
Absolutely, because who are we to say exactly what theater is? Like, it's such a cool, venerable art form that like it's going to continue to grow and break into new things. We just want to be able to like get on that train and stay on it.
Right. Yeah. So I also want to talk a little bit about Play Lab, and wondering if maybe Shawn, you can sort of talk about the Play Lab initiative, because one of the other things I love about Company One is that sort of dramaturgy and new work development is front and center of everything we're doing, right? It's sort of, I think that's where our organizations kind of intersect in a lot of ways, because it's almost like the development of the play and the process of nurturing the play is as important as the play being produced and being seen by an audience. And that feels very core to Company One.
Yeah. So Play Lab is the question?
Yeah. So talk us through that program.
Yeah, so I think pretty early on, not from the very beginning, but pretty early on, we realized that one of the best ways to make the kind of theater we wanted to make was to get more involved with the generative process. And for us, that's holding the playwright on high. And we've been really lucky to have some phenomenal playwrights come through Company One over the years who I think have really kind of dictated the narrative of what we do and therefore who we are in many ways. Yeah. And like you said, Mark, our job was to develop those plays, to support those writers, to find the audiences that these writers were not finding in other places. But, it was also to find experiences that were maybe peripheral to the center staging of the play that supported a larger effort, right? And that's where that concept of social change intersecting with the art came from. But yeah, we're really proud of our Play Lab programming. We have a resident playwright, our Mellon HowlRound resident playwright, Kirsten Greenwich, who is local, and we've been working with. I feel like Kirsten grew up as a playwright as we were growing up as a theater company right next to each other, and we've been producing Kirsten for a long, long time, and really proud of last summer's production with the A.R.T. Of Greater Good. And that was an awesome experience that we talked about. but Kirsten also runs our Play Lab experience. Um, and that is where we kind of support and cultivate plays and playwrights who are local. And we've worked and supported over 50 playwrights, and sometimes that's direct production-based work, right? We like the A.R.T does. In some ways, we are developing a play with that playwright from scratch to production, and oftentimes it's just getting that play up and ready to be produced, even if we're not producing it. And we're able to kind of help find that play a home. But more often than not, we're creating a community with those writers. And these writers, one of the other excellent things is it's a wildly diverse group of people, and it always has been. And so, we really focus on making sure that the voices in the program are voices that can really reshape the American theater. We're not interested in the same old thing. We're interested in something that we view as better. And I guess that harkens back to Summer's comment about our punk aesthetic. We do think that voices that disrupt, that challenge, and whether that's through form or content or who's on stage, whatever it may be, that's the future. And that's kind of guided us as we've grown. That's guided us at every step of the way.
Yeah, I think that really starts to inform the projects that we've worked on together over the last few years. And, Shawn, I guess it must have been maybe 5 years ago that you and Ari first had a conversation about what would it be? And I don't know, was that conversation purely about let's do We're Gonna Die in Oberon, or was it let's find a way to have this sort of continuous budding relationship?
I think it started off, it's like dating. I think we, as institutions, it started off with us being like, we think you look pretty great. And we think this could really work. But, we've done a lot of, so we collaborate on everything. Company One Theater does not perform in, its own theater. We perform all over the city in multiple, all sorts of things, in libraries and 1,400 seat theaters and 20 seat art galleries. We make theater everywhere, and that's last summer's production was in a brownstone schoolhouse, right? So that's actually really exciting for us, and there's pluses and minuses, but we've collaborated oftentimes, specifically as we're coming up with much larger institutions like the A.R.T. And we, some of those go really well and some of those are hard, right? And so when I say we dated, I think that's what I mean. There's a sense of, from both sides, I think I'm guessing from a larger institution, can we trust the work? Can we trust the integrity? Can we, whatever it may be, the professionalism? Can they take care of our audiences, right? And then from our side, it's, do they get it? Do they buy into the mission? Do they care enough? Is their audience going to look just like every regional theater audience, or is it actually going to be, is there going to be room for our audience? And our audience is, 60% under the age of 35, 40% people of color. And so it's a different kind of theater audience than a lot of theaters. And so Oberon felt like a pretty good fit in many ways. It had a young, interesting audience. And so talking to Ari, as far as I remember, you have to ask her. I think we were like, hey, this could be great. And I remember feeling like I had to sell the art. We had an incredible actor in our lead, Obehi Janice, and I was selling Obehi and selling the project and selling Young Jet Li, all of that was going to be the thing. But I remember how easy it felt and how it was yeah, of course that makes sense, and how great that will be. And the whole thing felt surprisingly easy. And that was kind of the beginning, I thought. And then we had so many kind of wonderful collaborations since. And, I'll speak from our side of things, Mark. I think there's a level of trust in this collaboration, and there's a level of care in this collaboration over the years that I think is rare that for us, and we so appreciate it. We found it in a few places, luckily in town. But this is one that is we have grown as a company thanks in part to our collaboration.
No, I think it's sort of a lot of what we've been talking about today. That I'm a firm believer that any problem in the theater can be fixed, except value alignment. And if as an artist you don't feel supported by an institution, or as an artist and as a producer, there's not sort of a shared understanding of what we are trying to achieve in telling the story, that the whole thing could fall apart. But anything else we can solve, right? And so that's been my view of why this has always worked so well, because I feel like we are always in a very specific kind of value alignment about the work. We'll solve anything else from there, right? So let's talk, let's like get a little more behind the scenes in some of these overall productions. And you've both directed at least 2 productions apiece in this space. And so, Summer, you directed this amazing production of Trauma Craney's Wig Out. That was such a blast, and like sort of like fit like a glove. And
did totally did.
But I also wanted to talk today because you directed Miss You Like Hell about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I think so.
Think so? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So I wonder if you can sort of first like set up the musical for folks who may not be familiar with it. And then I would love to sort of dig in with you about directing a musical in the round, which is always a trip.
Sure. I have to say this very quickly, that in 3 minutes, I think Zoom is going to tell me I need to go on to another meeting, and I don't know what that's going to look like on my screen. So I'm just going to quickly hit ignore and then move on. So if something goes wonky, that's what's happening. Gosh, Miss You Like Hell. Gosh, what a beautiful, beautiful piece. It is centered on a mother and daughter who are estranged from each other, and the daughter finds mom popping up in the middle of the night saying, "Come on this road trip with me." And the daughter's like super conflicted because she has all these feelings about mom, but decides to go because she wants that relationship. And we learn that mom is actually driving the daughter cross country because she needs her to testify on her behalf at her immigration status hearing. And she is on the verge of being deported. And so it's a beautiful, like, it's a good old American cross country journey. It is a mother daughter story. It is about the kindness of strangers and the help that we can find along the way. And I think ultimately it's about some of the harsh reality that exists in our country. And it's just a hell of a piece by Aaron Keown. We could see Keown and Kiara Huda.
I think I had been somewhere during the tech, so I sort of like came in to dress rehearsal or something, and I had been away for a few days, and it was I was like, oh, a lot had happened. I was like kind of distracted, and then by an hour in, I was like, oh god, am I gonna make it out of this one? It was so incredible. But that musical isn't necessarily written as something that has to be done immersively, right? Oh, Summer, maybe you're Zooming.
Sorry, no, something is happening. Yeah, so okay.
You're back, right? It's not necessarily, required by the text to do that in the round or to do this immersive production. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about like the advantages of that and sort of creating the impact on the audience or changing the audience's lens on the show in that space.
Yeah. Yes. So there were like a couple of things that felt like really important about why it needed to exist in the round. And one for me was, I think that sometimes in more traditional theater spaces where there's that really clean separation between what's happening on stage and what's happening within the audience, it creates like a screen effect. And, people sort of love that and love the idea of being able to peer in, but not feel complicit or compelled to move, to act. And the story is so immediate that we need people to get engaged. Like the story on stage is just perhaps an amplified version of a life that someone is living. And we have a power to, ask for change, to demand change, to vote for change, to do all of those things. And I think to move people from that passive sort of spectator view toward the like, I'm so deeply engaged in the story. There's something about putting everyone in the same space, everyone in the same room, mingling, talking, brushing up against each other, feeling each other, suddenly the light coming on and someone being like right there next to you, changes the way you pay attention. It changes the way you engage. It changes the way you feel about it, because ultimately you might be the person who could help that person. You might be the person who can do something about it. And so I wanted everyone to feel as if they could, like, maybe just by like standing up or like they were just like an instant away from doing something that could be useful, helpful. And so that was one thing. Another thing is the idea of journey. I think this was the risk I think I was taking. We were taking as a team, thinking about. I've had some of my deepest conversations in cars, where you're out on the open road, but you're also like you are there,
You're just thinking about
and you're not
everything.
going anywhere. And sometimes the silence is like speaking volumes as well. And so to put everyone kind of in that feeling of being on that journey, inside of that sort of that pressure cooker, felt important. And lastly, the Oberon is such a dope space that has all of these like wonderful little like nooks and crannies. And I don't do musicals. It's not necessarily my jam yet, although I think I'm becoming more and more intrigued about. This was something I had some conversations with lots of A.R.T folk about, the like musical theater button, and like how to like figure out what that moment is between the moment of the song and the moment of continuing the narrative that allows the audience to respond. And I really like wrestle with what that was. I was like, no, keep going, go, go, go. And audiences were like, absolutely not, we will applaud. But there's something really kind of special about the Oberon space that allows you to like find the magic in like the popping in and popping out and being high and suddenly being in the audience. But and a regular space would not afford.
Yeah, you're saying something that's really exciting to me, because a lot of times when people talk about that immersive experience in Oberon, it's always pitched to the audience like you're part of the play, you're part of the action, but it feels very like based in form, very specifically. And you're kind of getting at this thing about like it doesn't allow you to be a passive observer. Like you have to bear witness and be aware of your witness.
And maybe feel responsible. I don't know. There's something really moving to me about that. Like I want to watch plays that make me want to like get up and change the course of something. Make me feel like I, through one act, can like do something to save this. Because that means it's really tapping into like, all of my empathy and all of my care centers. And when I'm able to like really be in that space, then I'm activated to do more. That's important.
Yeah. Shawn, I would love to talk about a little bit about We're Gonna Die, which Sarah had mentioned before we went live. Everyone, Sarah was talking about how much she loved We're Gonna Die, which I knew in the moment that we were doing it, Sarah was a big fan, but I did not appreciate just how much she loved that show. So I wonder if you could just kind of set up the general conceit of the show. I'm going to want to pick your brain with a couple of questions about the production specifically.
Yeah, so it's a little bit tricky because it's not a kind of linear narrative play as we know them. It's kind of a a mix between stand-up comedy and a song cycle and storytelling. It's kind of a funny and sweet and dark piece. But the premise is this woman backed by a band telling stories that were kind of devastating on one hand, and I laugh because they were also very funny. But at the end, it was kind of I think the big premise was, we all may be miserable relative to the fact that none of us are going to live forever, and the losing and the loss and the dying is some of the deepest pains we'll ever experience. But we all do it together, and it's going to happen with all of us. It unites us. And so we had this kind of thing to walk this very fine line of finding the humor, finding the comedy, eventually finding the joy, but also finding the heaviness. And I love that Sarah loved it, because I found that people either loved it or really uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And in Oberon, like Summer was saying, and you were saying, Mark, you're implicated, right? And I thought it was we watched people have to kind of take themselves out of the space, not a lot, but on occasion, where it's just kind of like an emotionally overwhelming experience. Folks who have recently lost someone, and then we had other people who were just kind of like dying to hold the hand of the production of the people next to them, because it spoke to their experience in a different way. So
definitely, yeah. I was always struck by how, like, the acknowledgement of mortality allows you to sit in your humor and joy and comedy more. There's like some freeness or some freeing aspect of that I always felt like, to your point, like, yes, the show can be heavy and the stories are devastating, but at the same time, there's a lot of humor in it. Sort of tucked and maybe hidden in corners, but it's there,
right.
For sure.
And back to our playwright conversation. I mean, I think Young Shawn Lee is like just the best, and her work is really phenomenal. And this production, I think there were the playwright performed this, and I think a big part of this, she had said in some interview, is that she was not a performer or singer, and it's all her singing basically, and so she was really putting her vulnerable self forward, and the text feels autobiographical, and so our challenge was, we were one of the first to do it, not including her as performer. And we had lots of conversations about if this is successful, it will also feel autobiographical. And we had a very different kind of person in the lead role, and but we were lucky to have an incredibly talented Obehi in the lead role. It was really phenomenal. And her backing band was appropriately goofy and talented and wonderful. So
this for the audience was being like, what? You want us to sing that?
But they did it. It was beautiful.
So folks, those watching, feel free to jump into the Q&A. We've got some questions there already, and I want to get to those and have an opportunity to talk to folks that are watching and listen to the conversation. But we've talked about how Company One came to be. We've talked about this great relationship that has started between the A.R.T and Company One. But I'm really interested to know from the both of you. We find ourselves in this moment, not only as individuals grappling with how to make sense of this pandemic, but as theater practitioners thinking about our responsibility in storytelling and in convening, and how to sort of uphold that in a safe way. And I just wonder, I'm not asking for answers to those questions, because I don't know that they're totally answerable yet. But I wonder, as you're sort of locating yourself as a theater artist and as an artistic leader in this community, what you're thinking about, what's coming up for you, what you're considering in terms of our steps forward, our path forward in this time. And I'd love to hear from both of you on the topic.
Yeah. Well, these are the questions we've been asking ourselves for the last 3 months regularly. And we started as a collective, and we still have a lot of collective mentality and a lot of collective decision making. And it's important that when we move forward in any sort of value-based direction, we're all in. And so we decided that the priority over everything else in this moment were the people, taking care of the people. And as best we could as a small theater company, I should say that we're really lucky. Lots of conversations that I'm in these days, we happen to be in a lucky position where we're doing okay. We could always use support, but we're doing okay. We're going to be around for years to come. We're really happy about that. But we decided, first and foremost, we had no furloughs, no layoffs. We were going to take care of our staff. Secondly, we were going to take care of our artists. So we had to postpone. And I'm saying postpone, not cancel. We were going to do these again, but two full productions that we did. We were able to take care of the artists. We were able to pay artists 50% of their original contracts and offer all of those artists full contracts when we do finally redo those productions. And so it wasn't simple, it wasn't easy to figure out, but that was our priority. And then taking care of our audiences. And we have some plans I'm sure Summer can talk about, but how can we take care of our audiences in this moment and not pretend things are the same, not pretend that things are going to be the same necessarily, but really listen to the moment, listen to the folk, listen to our communities, and take our time to respond appropriately.
And I would add that we're really focused on thinking about, I think it's sort of fitting that we just showed this clip of the audience singing, like, we're going to die all together, and not in like a very morbid way, but in a, like, this is a moment where we are meeting challenge. And it's a moment where there's a lot of scary stuff that's happening in the world, but there's a power in us being able to kind of galvanize together to imagine what forward looks like. And I think the thing that we are feeling most responsible for is figuring out what forward looks like without leaving anyone behind. And we've seen so many examples of so many different communities that have been left behind during this awful, awful time. And we have to figure out a new way of being and a new way of doing the work that we are committed to doing, and a new way of serving the communities that we are always going to be committed to serving. And we have to be able to do that together. So we're getting ready to embark on hopefully what will be some really generative conversations that really focus on specific Boston communities and what those needs are right now. And some of those needs will be very immediate needs. Like, this is what this community is needing right now, and we're going to figure out how to funnel whatever resources we can into that community. And some of those things are also going to be a little bit loftier as we think about, well, what does forward look like? And we have a great opportunity to reimagine a city of Boston that really is able to serve everyone and serve them well, and serve them with not only what they need, but what everyone should be afforded. And so that's the sort of thought work and conversation work, and then actually like the boots on the ground work that we are aiming to do going forward.
Well, I feel like C1 is so positioned to do that because I think we hold this very true at A.R.T, and it's absolutely so important to the work that y'all do, is that we're asking more of the audience than the 2 hours of the play, right? We're asking them to do something before that, we're asking them to do something after that, and we're asking them to think about what the play means in terms of how they can change their thinking or activate around an issue. And I feel like that's been so true in every production I've ever seen a company one at Oberon or not. There's always so much more than just the play that's happening. There's some other things surrounding it that feel so important, in particular in this time.
Well, it's always a reflection of what's happening in life, right? Like I think like the highest calling, theater is the highest calling because it's meant to be a reflection on like what's happening in this moment in time, and get us to think differently about it, and get us to empathize, and get us to want to do better about it. And this time is no different.
Yeah. I think I saw some of the questions in the Q&A, and I think a lot of folks are asking kind of, how do you do it right now? How do you make theater right now? What's the plan? And specifically how you're reacting to the moment. And I think, we've got a couple of great things happening, but I think it requires patience, at least for us, right? Like, I don't think we are a company who's going to be putting out, suddenly a whole lot of digital theatrical experiences and pretending they're not TV or, something else. I think right now we're working heavily on the social justice side, as Summer kind of alluded to, but we're also really leaning into play development right now. That is something we can do. And, we have a great collaboration currently with the A.R.T Center at BCNC, Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, where we have 2 resident playwrights who are familiar, I think, to you, Mark, and maybe your audiences in Kitty and Melissa Lee. And they originally were going to be meeting with residents in the Chinatown community and developing a play. And we had this kind of connection there to develop this piece together through those community meetings. And obviously the concept of meeting has changed. And at that time, we didn't know what it was going to be about, but we assumed, knowing where Chinatown lived in our communities, it was going to be about gentrification. Now, we are reimagining that piece, and we're thinking about it. How can we convene digitally, and how can this piece speak to what is happening now? Because that would, communities like Chinatown have a whole new challenge, whether that is a new kind of racism, whether folks are going to come back, to those restaurants, to those establishments, to that space in the face of gentrification. And so that sort of project is ongoing, and we're diving deeper, and we're pivoting. And so leaning into the development so that when the time is right for us to be live, we're ready to fly with work that is impactful and of the moment is a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah. On the topic of partnerships, I'm going to dig into some of these Q&A questions, if I may. I don't think we'll get through all of them, but we'll try and follow up in like the push or email with some questions that we may not get to, maybe with some written answers if we can. So here we have several Boston Arts Academy theater majors have found amazing acting opportunities with Company One. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship with the school? And I would extend that to like your education programs in general, which are so robust, and how that relationship is an illustration of C1's mission.
You go for it.
I'll just start by saying Boston Arts Academy.
I failed you. Summer and Shawn told me before we started to make sure that I like call them because we were really good at like. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That was a short moment. It was a short one of like, who's doing it? So I just want to say, like, Boston Arts Academy, this is Boston's only public arts school, and there's tremendous talent within those walls, and tremendous talent that have passed through those halls, and I think it's like a sin and a shame if people feel like they can't find an artistic home in their own city. Because the likelihood of companies being willing to take the risk is ridiculous. I think we owe it to the young people of our city and the young artists and the folks who are makers and thinkers and dreamers to give them a place to nurture all of those things. And if they can't do it in their own backyard, what's the point of us being here? So I feel really passionately about that. The Boston Arts Academy will always have a place in our hearts and in our Company One.
I was so lucky to have taught there for a couple of years, and that was, I think, also core to our connection. Linda Nathan, who founded Boston Arts Academy, still sits on the Company One Theater Board, along with Roz Thomas Clark, who founded the theater department there. and we have a deep
John
connection.
Decaje.
John Decaje is still teaching there, is on our board, and is a playwright and a filmmaker. We have, but this kind of long line of students who've become grown folk doing the thing all over the city, winning awards. Yeah. And it's, I know, right? I remember when we were young and scrappy, and now we're up the grandpa in the corner being like, I knew him when. But,
it happened last night. Kadaj Bennett.
Last night. That's right. Kadaj Bennett. And even now we work with BAA alum all the time. Yeah, as Summer said, it's an incredibly valuable institution. We'll continue to do it as long as we'll have us.
There's a lot of questions here. You kind of pointed this already, Shawn. Folks asking like projects that we may be working on together about coming out of this time that y'all may be focused on during this time. That we certainly have been talking. Shawn and I maybe have talked more in the last 3 weeks about trying to find a way out of this. But I think that's for me, it's still the big question, right? And we've talked about this a little bit, like what is it that we need? What is it that an audience needs? I don't know that it will be safe for a while to sit together in a theater. And B, is that the way in which we want to experience catharsis in this moment? I don't know.
So we feel that we, being who we are, the size we are, and the flexible nature of what we do, we feel strongly that we don't have to keep the lights on right now by putting people at risk. And so, coming back to the people first, we're not yet interested in considering putting folks in a rehearsal room, unfortunately, or let alone audiences in a space. I think when the time comes for that, I anticipate having a backlog of performance ready to explode onto the scene. And Mark has alluded to those conversations, and because what we're talking about is no lack of ideas and no lack of kind of what's needed artistically in this moment. And when we come out of this moment, we've got some great project ideas that will be, we hope, collaborations with the A.R.T. But the question is when. And I'm not going to pretend to know that better than anyone. I will say at this moment that our company and everybody, this is controversial, but it's our own, we've decided that we are not going to convene a live event at this point until March of 21. So that's and that may change, hopefully in a better direction, but maybe in the other direction. And we're our managing director is got about 14 different scenario plans. That's the life we're living right now. And blessed to have partners like you all, where we can call and say, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? So we're doing that all over the map.
It's 1 o'clock. Can you believe it?
Wow.
I feel like there's so much more to cover. There's so much more we could talk about. But that's time is not a construct in the quarantine. It's still very real. So here we are. Summer and Shawn, thank you so much for taking this time today. I know that we're all pulling in a million directions right now to what you just said, Shawn, about scenario planning and thinking and talking to our colleagues and talking to peers and trying to figure out the way forward. And so to take this time and spend an hour today and chat with our audience is really exciting. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Mark. And thanks to the whole A.R.T. team. We're fans, so thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. And we'll try to pull some of these questions for folks that we didn't get to. We'll try to pull some of these out and see if we can get some written answers for you in the follow-up email.
Happily.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Please join us next week. Next week, we're going to have Ifoma Fafunwa, the creator of Hear Word, coming to us live from Lagos. So it's going to be more like a dinner with Lunsford for Ifoma. But she'll be on next week. So make sure you tune in. Thanks, everyone.
Be well.
Take care, everyone.